We're talking about national security and international security. So we're going to not have to pay anything other than the fact that we are building the Golden Dome, and the Golden Dome is going to be something that's going to be very amazing. It'll be Israel times probably 100, and we need it.
This is an anti-missile system. People would have heard of the Iron Dome in Israel, which is, again, counter-missile, counter-drone system to take down missiles and drones fired into Israel from Iran or from Gaza or from Lebanon, from Hezbollah and Hamas, etc., etc. And also, people are seeing in Ukraine, the thousands of missiles and drones being fired into Ukraine, a rather ad hoc type Iron Dome there with Patriot missiles and other anti-aircraft missiles, anti-drone missiles to try and counter that. What Trump is talking about is having the sort of Golden Dome to stop, I think, ostensibly intercontinental ballistic missiles, ostensibly nuclear ones from China, Russia, and to a lesser extent, North Korea. But it's a strange argument, of course. The main threat to the United States is from Russia. When one looks at the nuclear program, there is pretty much parity. The US has about 4,500 nuclear warheads, and so does Russia. Actually, if Trump could persuade Putin to reduce his warheads and stop fighting in Ukraine and elsewhere, then that would nullify the reason to do that. He talks about China. Now, China has about 400 warheads, so there's no parity there. So people talk, one sees the threat from China, and we talk about in this country very much a cyber threat and a financial threat and a whole host of other things. But the nuclear piece is pretty irrelevant. The sums just don't work. There's no way China would fire a nuclear weapon at the US, because the US have got 10 times the amount, sort of thing.
We make a historic announcement about the Golden Dome missile defense shield. That's something we want. And Ronald Reagan wanted it many years ago, but they didn't have the technology. But it's something we're going to have. We're going to have it at the highest level.
Ultimately, this right here, the Golden Dome for America, is a game changer. It's a generational investment in the security of America and Americans. Mr. President, you said we're going to secure our southern border and get 100% operational control after the previous administration allowed an invasion of people into our country. President Reagan 40 years ago cast the vision for it. The technology wasn't there. Now it is, and you're following through to say we will protect the homeland from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones, whether they're conventional or nuclear.
When we talk about a Golden Dome, we're not just talking about anti-missiles, big missiles being fired from Greenland. It would be a comprehensive system, one assumes. Now, one assumes that the Americans are working very deeply on this. No doubt talk about not aircraft, but spacecraft out in space, maybe attacking sites as soon as they open up with lasers or whatever, the use of cyber, the use of a whole host of other counter-missile technology. So I think I'm sure in people's mind's eye, they're seeing missiles fired into the sky to hit missiles at them, which is a lot of what people see with the Iron Dome in Israel. But, that is almost yesterday's technology. So I don't think we should get too fixated by perhaps hardware that might be on the ground. There's a whole comprehensive way of doing this. But in order to prevent countries firing missiles into the United States and attacking them, it will need to be a very comprehensive system, and no doubt cost a very, very high amount of US dollars.
I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that.
I think his idea yesterday to buy Greenland, it is. I think it was a ruse, and the fact today he's changed it to he's not going to invade Greenland. He's not going to buy it. But what he appears to be agreeing to is to put bases on Greenland, as per the Cyprus scenario, which seems reasonable. And many people argue he always had that ability to do it. So it seems that Trump's way of negotiation is to go so far out to the right or the left that people think it's ridiculous, and then start to get really worried that things are going to blow up in our faces, and then he comes to some sort of more reasonable and acceptable idea. But the only way that Trump could probably get Greenland, in other words, to include Greenland in the whole USA, would be to buy it, and presumably everybody has their price. And if every Greenlander, as you say, was offered $1 million, that might be enough. And there is precedent, of course. The US brought Alaska off Russia in 1867, I think it was, and bought the American Virgin Islands, I believe, off a European country as well. So in history, these sort of things have happened, but in 2026, it seems unlikely. And what we are learning today is that Trump seems to be agreeing something far more acceptable with NATO, with Denmark, and with Greenland about putting American forces on Greenland. That if that is what happens, then I think everybody breathes a great sigh of relief, and hopefully that will satisfy Trump for now.
Big, beautiful piece of ice. It's hard to call it land. It's a big piece of ice.
The USA is probably the only country in the world that could afford to do this, certainly a comprehensive one. And it would cost trillions and trillions of dollars. But I'm sure that there is no way you can protect the whole of the United States from any sort of airborne attack. That technology doesn't exist at the moment. The technology does exist, one assumes, for the US to do that for intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I think once you nullify that, the US would have very much a march on the Russians and the Chinese. It is unlikely, where it seems impossible, that Russia could do the same. Certainly we've seen, if Ukraine can fire missiles deep into Russia, with homemade drones, then you wouldn't imagine Russia has the technology to do something similar. And certainly Russia would not have the money in any shape or form. China might well do, but again, it would seem counterintuitive, although China is spending a lot on its military. Again, the Chinese seem more in commerce, and financial dealings are far more important to them. So again, why would they spend such a huge percent of their GDP on some sort of defensive screen? So I think it's technically it would be possible. It would cost a fortune, and the US are probably the only people who could afford it. It would be incongruous for us to spend that sort of money on a defense system, but no doubt Britain is thinking of improving our air defenses, which we're learning from Ukraine is something we need to, but not to the extent of having a golden dome, as President Trump calls it. Yeah, the US could probably do it. It would cost a fortune, but if the US people are prepared to underwrite that check for Trump, then they could do it.